spinning them a yarn. So this evening's tasting, we sort of, Tom and I chatting with sort of various tasting ideas, and we're a champion of a lot of different grape varieties, and you know, some of the classics we find, but there's also a lot of wines that are really brilliant, that are off a lot of people's radars. And so some of you may have been lucky enough to have joined us for Grape Expectations Red, where we chased a few grape varieties around the globe. And now we're on to Grape Expectations for the white wines. And again, we've sort of got some selections here that probably you wouldn't choose naturally, and secondly, I think the important part here is with a lot of these grape varieties that aren't championed, there's a particular reason why a lot of them aren't championed, is that they either are very difficult to grow in a vineyard environment, or they produce wines that aren't particularly attractive to today's drinking requirements, which is being very fruit forward, easy to manage, and very, you know, probably not huge amounts of complexity, but you know, they make a lot of people quite probably happy. Would be the alcohol aside, you know, they provide a lot of simple pleasures. So I think that's probably the biggest caveat with these wines is that if you have you know, like we'll try Gewürztraminer or a Caricante that later on, if you have an entry level one of those, it'll probably be quite unexciting, it'll probably be uneventful, and you would have had it on holiday and it won't really have sort of set your world on fire. Sorry, there's lots of people sort of dropping off and then coming back in, so I'm just having to readmit people. So apologies for that. Oh, just there. Perfect. Yeah, so just finish on that. So I think, yes, I think with a lot of these slightly obscure grape varieties, you really need to do your homework, or be really lucky enough to be traveling within that region, or attending a tasting, or a tasting like this, where you're shown really what the variety is capable of in the right hands. And you'll see every single wine that we've got this evening is made by a producer that has really gone over and above the sort of standard requirements to get the most out of it.
I can do that, can I?
Hang on, I'm gonna mute you, Luke, because you're talking to yourself. Right.
I'm gonna stop it now.
I sit next to Luke at work, and he does talk to himself. It's very confusing when is that me that you're talking to, or the rest of the world? So, first one of the evening. Well, I think actually before we start, there's a very important happy birthday to be said to Debbie, who I think has been invited for this tasting. So here's to birthday cheers to Debbie. Take care. There we are. So obviously we are now, they keep coming. So Cellar Alamara, it's time, it's map time, very exciting. I know you're all going to be quite excited. Okay, so we are in Catalonia, okay, and Catalonia, obviously northern Spain, right up against the coast, predominantly known for the wines that are in Penedès, and everyone who knows their wine is Penedès is Cava country. So, you know, this is the epicenter of Cava. It's the only place that it can be made. But also you've got Priorat here within the region of Catalonia. But the region we're specifically looking at is Terra Alta up here. Obviously high Terra Alta up in the hills, and a little bit further south for the region of Catalonia. So again, you're getting quite high heat here as you know, diurnal temperatures go, but you're up at altitude. So again, you're getting a relatively cooling influence here from the vines themselves. Now, the grapes themselves, here you've got a blend of Macabeo, which again is also known as Viura in Spain. And you also got the other part of the blend is Granacha Blanco, or white Grenache. So with a lot of these grape varieties, and we'll talk about, you know, the Gewürztraminer is probably one of the most prolific, is that they are grape varieties that have moved across boundaries and have probably mutated to a certain degree and then been adopted or possibly crossed or you know, taken to sort of different parts of Europe and further afield, and sort of made into well, not made into, but sort of christened with a new name. But anyway, Macabeo is predominantly a grape variety that you see in Rioja, but also you know, the other main part of it is here in Catalonia, and then the sort of style, it's kind of a mild acidic on its own. If you sort of drank it, it's a sort of young white, mildly acidic, but very sort of basic, nothing huge amounts of complexity. And often, more than not, it's used in a blend because on its own, it doesn't really have a huge amount to provide to a style of wine, other than a good racy acidity and a certain amount of backbone. What you're then seeing is you're seeing a little bit of Granacha Blanco, which is white Grenache. And this is a lot more the sort of fruit-forward style part of the wine. White Grenache, obviously a relative of red Grenache, one of the great grape varieties of the Rhone, the predominant blend of the Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And in this guise, the white Grenache, again, it's sort of crossed over the years, and it provides a style that is very much, like I say, quite floral, and it provides a bit more weight to a wine. So that's why you sort of see where this sort of blending, but it's actually thought to have actually, the word I'm looking for is originated in Catalonia, they reckon, the Grenache Blanc. So, you know, this really is home territory. So we are in the Terra Alta region, and what's interesting here is Terra Alta is pretty much in the nicest possible, you know, it's a real sparsely populated agricultural country, and to make the wines there, it was very much a local process. And you know, it never really left very much far out of there, of the local region for drinking, and to the extent where you know, you only really saw it outside of the local region when it became a cooperative, and one or two of the main cooperatives out there were so heavily invested in, they actually became these quite impressive and really lovely to go and see if you're over there, is the sort of wine cathedrals, these cooperatives. They were heavily invested in by many different growers, and in the capital of Terra Alta and Gardesa, you've actually have some beautiful old architecture with the sort of Catalonian arch, so sort of freestanding, beautiful wineries, quite impressive. And again, with cooperatives, what happens is everyone pitches in, but no one actually is really gunning for a top quality wine. They're just finding an outlet for their fruit. So we are finally here, and I've just got to bring up their names because before I sort of forget. But here, what's happened is Cellar Alamara is a project that's actually British interest. So you've got two winemakers. You've got Andy and Ali McLeod, who are the main investors. And then they had an English consultant, I think Andrew Halliwell, who's came in and said, look, we can make some interesting wines here, but you know, you need to really sort of put some effort behind it, which a lot of people weren't willing to do. And so that's what they've done, and they've really started looking at what they've got, the soils that they've got, and the aspect of the property, and really have got the best out of the grape varieties that they've got there. And what you've got is this, great, interesting wine. It's not going to blow your socks off. We sort of sell it at sort of £12.50 in Honest Grapes, and I think it's lovely, and it's slightly different. If you pull out a lot of people who have sort of experience with white wines from Spain, it's a holiday thing, and it's the last thing they wanted to put in their luggage. They would have rather packed a sombrero rather than a couple of bottles of white. And for us, this is a great project, and we actually found it here in the UK. We met Ali McLeod. He was at a tasting. He said, "Try this." He makes a great red, a white, and a rosé, and yeah, we're quite excited. So I've been talking solidly flat out for 10 minutes. So I'll be interested to see what everyone thinks. Obviously, that exciting. You're all speechless. So
I'll mute myself. I'm allowed to talk now, I think. Anyone's allowed to talk now. It's the only time I'm in. Yeah, I've always really liked it. It's been a staple for a while. Ali and Andy do really great work, especially at the price point. It overperforms. I think Terra Alta, the land isn't particularly expensive there, the vineyard land, so that helps bring added value, or at least keeps the cost down for everything. It's kind of one of those parts of Catalonia where it's affordable, relatively affordable for winemakers to go in, or at least those interested in making wine one way or another to go in and make something that's going to make it to the UK market and not be a crazy price bracket, but they can put quite a lot of money behind making the wine and make a really good product for not a huge amount of money. I think that there's a really nice, slight sort of nutty mineral thing. I don't know if anyone else gets that. I think it's 100% stainless steel. I actually haven't got the tech sheet or anything here. I don't think there's any oak there.
No, and I think that's an important. I know, Jeremy, you're asking about oaking, and these are wines that they are very fresh, very fruity in style, and any big oaking you will see will will lose that sort of freshness. I think what you may think of why that sort of rounded style of it, and that's very much the white Grenache, the sort of sibling of Roussanne and Marsanne, and create that richness. And that's why I think they've put the two together. You've got the white Grenache, which is used to making very sort of fruit driven, but maybe low acidity, slightly flabby wines, and then having that backup of the backbone with the Macabeo to really give it that sort of zip that's required. And I think this is a great wine to go with a lot of foods, because you've got the freshness, you've got the acidity that you can have it with sort of simple salads and goat's cheese and stuff like that. But you can start going into slightly heavier dishes, a little bit Ronin style, because you've got that sort of interesting white Grenache. So yeah. Hopefully a hit. I mean, it is a hit across for us, and like Jeremy says, the rosé is excellent, and their red's great value as well, and they sort of use a lot of winemaking techniques that are sort of probably not to the local. Not to the local standard, that's not right, but you probably wouldn't sort of see on a local scale, but they've really sort of invested and brought in some new thoughts and ideas, and have seen a possibility for the region, which a lot of the Spanish in general wouldn't have done. So again, it's an interesting project. So unless sorry to be that guy, but our label says mix of stainless steel and French oak barrels. Look at that. It does.
So yeah, that'll definitely be the bigger, older kind. I'm going to say, 'cause there is that nutty little element which I think speaks of the grape variety, but also there's just a little bit of oxygenation there over the 12 months or so it will have spent in the barrel.
Yeah. So to stipulate the difference on that, they would have made the wine itself in stainless steel, where they would have had a lot more control, Peter. And then what they will do is just to sort of store the wines and let them settle, they will split them between some stainless steel and large oak barrels, like Luke was saying. So when we're talking about oak barrels, there'll be your standard ones that you see in a lot of photos. They're 250-litre ones where there'll be new oak, and they'll impart a lot of oak notes to the wine. These will be probably much larger in style and have been in the winery for several years, if not the odd decade or two, and produce a certain more delicate style of flavour, because otherwise, like I say, I think it would be taking over the wine itself. So, but still, you know, looking at it, it's 13.5%, so there's still a lot of punch in there, and they're getting a good amount of ripeness to be able to get that alcohol content. But for me, it sits perfectly well within the wine style itself. So, unless we've got any more questions of our delightful Cellar Alamara, I will move on to wine number 2.
Cool. Just seen that comment there from Jeremy, so I'm probably a bit behind. The rosé is great. I think that often the alcohol content is about 14.5 even. The colour's a little bit dark, often like puts some people off, but it does a really great job, something a bit different if you're interested in trying slightly more esoteric kind of rosés. There's nothing to be scared of. It's not sweet. It's not overly fruity or anything, but it shows Grenache, I think, or Garnacha in a kind of new light and what can be done in the pretty intense heat of Catalonia, but there's quite a lot of altitude there, so it stays nice and fresh, but it's a big wine, so definitely worth trying the rosé as well.
Thank you very much, Luke. Thank you very much. So we are now on to wine number 2, and for some the Gewürztraminer, and this can be a little bit of a Marmite wine, the Gewürztraminer, and I think again this is where you need to be very careful of not only the producer that you're choosing, but also the sort of quality point that you're reaching for. So Gewürztraminer has got a really interesting story, in the sense that as a grape variety, you know, it stems from the Traminer grape, which is a very simple, nondescript white wine, and sort of, you know, during the sort of 10th century, it pretty much grew everywhere, very much sort of cooler climate, sort of Alsace, Germany. It's moved around quite a few parts of the world, but that was the original start of the Traminer. And reading about it a little bit today, going back into the history, it's quite genetically, it's quite an unstable grape. So it's sort of seen quite a few mutations over time. And it's gone to a grape variety called Sauvignon Blanc, not Sauvignon Blanc, but Sauvignon Blanc, which is one of the grape varieties that you see to make the vin jaune of Jura. And then you get Sauvignon Rouge, which sort of produces another style. And so the Traminer grape was going through a variety of mutations, and was picked up by the Germans, who thought this is a very nice grape, and they thought, well, actually, it's a little bit herbal or spicy, and that is the literal translation of Gewürzt, which is, spice or herb. So it's the spicy Traminer is its name. So as a grape variety, it's classically associated with being quite fruit forward. Quite a bit of sort of spice, is very much linked to, a lot of people say, lychees. So, fresh lychees, which is what a lot of people get. And hopefully if you sort of stick your nose in there, you'll get lychees. We all eat lychees on a relatively, or lychees, or not leeches, but lychees, on a relatively regular basis. So it's a bit hard to remember what they smell like. But this is the classic nose of Gewürztraminer, and again, it's a great variety that does very, very well, not only in Germany, but it excels in Alsace, up in the northern region. I'm not going to get you too excited with maps at this stage, but if you do, I can always, we can show of hands and I'll show you where Alsace is. But your French-German border up in the north, so your cool climate, quite critical in terms of where the aspect of the slope is for the ripeness. But so yeah, Gewürztraminer, it can produce some absolutely amazing wines, and along with the likes of Riesling, it can go through varying degrees of sweetness. It's susceptible to noble rot, where it can get sweeter and sweeter, and you can get sort of Sauterne-like qualities, and the ageability of the top Gewürztraminers are on par with the Grand Crus of Riesling, and can go for decades, 40, 50, 60 years. So it's not impossible. So as a grape variety, it has huge amounts of potential, but it has this probably pungency and flavor profile that, if it's poorly managed as a winemaker, I think it can put off a lot of people. Laura from Peter Love says strange nose, and yes, it is, and I think that's one of its unfortunate things. It's a bit Marmite. People sort of expect it to have this sort of very intoxicating and very, you want to dive in, and yet Gewürztraminer actually on the nose, it's slightly odd. On the palate, it's got an amazing acidity and amazing different complexity and flavor. Yes, it's not. I think we're sort of attuned to a different flavor profile for a lot of wines, and this lychee flavor is quite dominant. But I think here, this is where we're in Domaine Kinsler. This is 5th generation winery. He's got vines in Ribeauville, which is one of the main centers of Alsace. And they've been making wines through, well, for 5 generations, but more importantly, they've got some very important not high value, but really top end.
There's a lot of Grand Cru hectares there, isn't there?
Yeah.
I can't remember how many it is. They've got quite a few hectares of Grand Cru, particularly used for Riesling and stuff.
Yeah, and that's critical because you're looking at a wine producer that is making very high-end Alsace. We're talking, 60, 70, 80 quid bottles of Alsace top-end wine. And so he's got the knowledge. And so this is his, we'll not call it entry level, but this is his sort of beginner of Gewürztraminer, and he goes up from there. And that is critical for something like the Gewürztraminer. But I don't know, I can see some people are like, it's a strange nose and what they think of it. Has anybody got any, preferences? And you can say if you don't like it, but this is really something that I think everyone needs to have a little bit of a Gewürztraminer in their wine lineup.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what people think. I think there's a lot of that spice, like you'd expect. I think that's probably the mainly, you don't get it on a huge amount of grape varieties, particularly not just straight from the fruit. Often the spice would be from the barrel character from the wood, so it'd be like sweet baking spice, something like that. But this is straight from the grape, so nutmeggy, cinnamony, slightly toasty, but definitely floral character, which it's kind of that top end, quite perfumed profile that, like you said, it can be a little bit Marmite. There are some which are massively overblown. I think they're just, through generally being a cool climate grape, a lot of producers have always been scared of underripeness, so go too far the other way and pick a bit too late, and then you get that sort of perfume bomb along with all the fruit and the spice, which added with a bit too much residual sugar sometimes is probably what's given the grape variety a bad name. Apart from it's not everyone's cup of tea anyway, but I think that there's quite a lot of slightly bland, or bland is probably the wrong word, over perfumed kind of one-dimensional Gewürztraminer.
And I think you're right, and I think there's no, you can say bland in the sense that you're absolutely right that it's one-dimensional, and it can be slightly overly sweet, and most people's experiences of it are probably, you know, at the wrong end of the scale, which is a shame. I mean, I'm not saying everyone should sack up loads and loads on Gewürztraminer, but I think it should be remembered that it is there, and there's some people that you know, on the chat here saying, you know, it's great with spiced foods. There's even a side chat whether it should be Thai curry or Indian curry, but we'll leave that for another day. But I think this is, without doubt, the classic wine to go if you're having to ask for spicy foods. What goes with sort of spicy foods? And the reason is twofold, I think, with Gewürztraminer, is that, yes, there is normally a little bit of residual sugar in there, and there's different sweetness levels that you can look at, just like there is in a lot of German and Alsace wines in general. They'll go up in levels of sweetness. But here it's that lychee quality that really is quite dominant, and that's a real good foil for a lot of the sort of spices that you'll see. And there is this spice, it's like a peppery sort of spice that is really apparent within the Gewürztraminer grape, and it works phenomenally well. David's just come up with it goes well with strong cheese. And actually, Karen, I think I might have trumped you on the wild boar sausage today. I actually have. It's actually that, well, you can't see that. That's really disappointing. I've got some truffled brie that's there, and actually I've just had some, and it goes fantastically well with Gewürztraminer. So I am the first-hand experience that it's gone massively well. So yes.
Yeah, I think with the curry situation, the curry argument, you might say that the more fragrant, the better. I think that's what it really comes up against. I think it will go with something a little bit more straight down the line as well. But if you're struggling because something's got a lot of, say, lemongrass, Thai basil, that sort of Southeast Asian stuff, but then equally from the Indian subcontinent, anywhere where there's tons of cardamom, something like that, it's going to hold its own against that. And there's a bit of residual sugar. I was just looking up actually, because again, I didn't have the tech notes before, but I think it's about 5 or 6 grams. Actually, sorry, it's 7.8 on this vintage.
Oh,
so
yes, it was the
higher than your standard.
Yeah.
But you feel it slightly, but it kind of the amount of floral aroma and the intensity that comes with the spice and things like that, it kind of warrants that slight sweetness, or it's more of a textural thing. I think you feel it more than you taste it.
Yeah, and I think the note when we're going to spice as a side note is that when you're having spicy food and you're trying to pair it up with wines, it's a perennial problem for us, because people go, well, you know, what should I have with spicy food? And there's people that sort of, you know, shudder at the thought of too much ground black pepper as being overly spicy, and then there's people that will, you know, pour, you know, a good liter of Tabasco on something, or put some raw chilies on. So spice is a very personal thing that you know, different people react to different levels of spice. And so, you know, for anybody, I suppose, is if it's too spicy for you, whatever dish it is, then the wine is not ever going to be able to compete. There's just no way. So you need to have something that's well spiced and mildly spiced, but if it's blowing the roof of your mouth off, no wine is going to be able to compete with that. If it's got an absolutely, as Luke was saying, you need to be in the more fragrant category of curries and flavorful, rather than just pure wicked heat to be about as basic as it is, because otherwise you're never going to find it, and then you may as well be in beer or something else completely different, because wine isn't going to be able to do that. So that's quite important.
I don't know what anyone else thinks. I always hesitate slightly to ask if anyone really doesn't like it, but it'd be interesting to hear if it's gone the wrong end of Marmite for anyone. But something I find with Alsace, and I don't know if this is purely anecdotal, but if there's any kind of grape variety that you've maybe had a bad experience with before, anything like that, Alsace tends to be quite restrained, tends to be quite subtle on most expressions of what they do. The terroir is suited to that. I think they're very much kind of vineyard based. They don't overwork things too much, and that's not to say everything is brilliant from Alsace, but if you think Riesling is too aromatic, or you think you've had some Pinot Blanc that you weren't impressed with, or anything like that, it's always, Alsace seems like a safe bet to go to tone things down slightly and go back to basics of what the grape variety is about. I mean, there's all kinds of New World Gewürztraminer, which some of it's really interesting. You get some from Central Otago in New Zealand, nice cool climate with tons of sun. So it's not a million miles from Alsace in climate. But they are more perfume and bigger. And some of them are great, but I think the Alsace expression of Gewürztraminer, slightly more subtle. It's more like the Northern Italian, the Slovenian kind of side, as opposed to the New World approach to the same grape.
And I think Jeremy sort of said it's quite approachable, and I think that you're absolutely right. As Alsace have a slightly more restrained style, and like I say, it's really critical at this point when you're looking at grape varieties that may not be mainstream, and that you find. Do a little bit of research, really, or go with somebody who knows what who knows the grape and knows the wine style that should be produced, because then you're actually getting a really good representation without paying it, either top dollar or below the sort of market. But below what below a tenner would probably not give you a good indication of what an Alsace Gewürztraminer. So, and that's quite important. So, having visited the delights of Gewürztraminer and Alsace, I think we're ready, and I'm quite looking forward to this because I'm going to give Luke virtually the whole microphone. We are going on to our final wine here, which is
it's the Apadura from Tenuta de Fecina.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just trying to double check what I had.
Okay, I've obviously had tons of time to prepare, so I know exactly what I'm doing. No,
we're coming with a map. Don't panic.
Yeah, if I've done nothing else, I've prepared 2 maps, not 1 but 2. So I think a lot of people aren't particularly familiar with Sicily. We were there with the Griot from Volpi before. I forget which tasting was that. Anyway, wine therapy about 6 weeks ago or so. We had a Sicilian white, which was Grillo, and they are famous for a few things in Sicily, and some of it's quite big volume. Catarratto is probably the biggest volume grape that you're getting there. Biggest volume white grape, and then there's a few reds. There's Nero d'Avola, and over to where this wine's coming from this evening. So, for example, the Musmeci from Tenuta de Fecina, the Nerello Mascalese. Oh, here we are. This will help me. The Nerello Mascalese. Sorry, it takes me 3 attempts to say that. Is the famous kind of red grape from Mount Etna. So I think that there's 2 kind of really high quality wines made on Mount Etna, and the red is Nerello Mascalese, and the white that we have here tonight is 100% Caricante, which you don't really see grown anywhere else at all, let alone anywhere else on Sicily. So it's quite a unique thing. So it really fits the theme for this evening, and it's something to say really about Sicily. Obviously, it's hot. You've got the hot air often blowing up from North Africa. So generally very hot climate, but most of the vineyards around Mount Etna are between 800 and 1100 meters high. So it's high, and it's quite deceiving if you see pictures of it or anything, because it's so massive. The mountain is so huge. I don't know if anyone's been there. Be interested to hear. It's quite a shallow slope. It never gets super steep until the very peak of the mountain. So you could be forgiven for thinking it's not that high, but it's huge, and it slowly creeps up. So you can be stood at a vineyard at around about 1,000 meters, and there's kind of no steepness when you're looking down towards the sea. It's quite deceptive. But yeah, these guys onto this wine. The Caricante generally is grown on the eastern and southern side of the mountain. The most famous parts for the Nerello Mascalese is the northern and eastern as well. So they both kind of go onto the eastern portion of the mountain. And sorry, I should say volcano. It's active volcano more than mountain. And the characteristics generally of Nerello are likened to, it's kind of like a very Sicily, very Etna specific Pinot Noir. Has kind of the same aging ability when it's made well, when it's grown well, and the same ability to express the terroir. So really various parcels within hardly any kind of distance of each other. So meters apart.
I'm going to give you the exciting map.
Oh, here we are, map number 2.
Hang on, of Etna. Look at that.
It's quite a privilege to have the maps operated for me. I'm liking this. Excellent. So here we are. So you can see the north, the east, and the southern portion of the volcano are where the vineyards are. They're kind of outlined by this dark blue line. But where we are with the Caricante is the eastern and the southern parts. The vineyard for this mainly on the east is southeastern. So where you can see the tiny village of Milo there, and Murgo producer down there, kind of specifically. They're not far from there at all. If you'd like to know exactly where Tenuta de Fusina is, it's actually marked on this map. It's kind of the northeastern side. It's in capital letters there. So that's where the winery operation is, and a lot of their most prominent Nerello Mascalese vineyards are there. But all the white grapes come from further southeast, and that tends to be the favourable position for the white grapes on Etna. And so that's pretty much the basics of the map. Like I said, that whole band that has the vineyards on is around about an average of 1,000 meters. So pretty high, and keeps the freshness of all the wines that are grown there. And I think definitely a quote from Jancis Robinson and generally the trade and any wine people are, as a fine wine area, as a fine wine region, Etna is super exciting for things that have it's improved leaps and bounds from, say, 20 years ago, even more so than most of the rest of Italy.
Here's a picture of Luke mesmerised by...
Mesmerised. So, okay, yeah, let's be a bit more specific. These are some 100-year-old, they're Nerello Mascalese vines, but the oldest Caricante vines, I think, are up to about 80 years old, anything from 30 to 80, what they used to make this wine. So still pretty old vines, but they've got some that far out age 100 years. So these are 100-year-old vines, I was told, specifically by the winemaker there, Jacopo. You can see the peak of Etna. It's one of the few times where it's actually clear up there. It's so often.
Exactly, yeah.
And if the rest of the whole of Italy, or the rest of Sicily at least, is clear blue sky, often the peak of Etna will have its own little cloud kind of formation around the top of it.
And I think, sorry, I'm going to cut in. I think the Caricante grape is very absolutely stuck to Sicily. You really don't see it anywhere else in the world. This is, we've talked about Gewürztraminer being in different parts of the world. We've talked about Macabeo and Grenache Blanc being in different parts of the world. Caricante, pretty much, nowhere else other than Sicily. This is really its homeland, and it's not even Sicily, it's the slopes of Mount Etna. There really is, there's nowhere else in the world that grows it on any sort of level that like these guys do. And admittedly, it's a particular style, and to get the best out of it, you again need to be looking to a winemaker that's really sort of taken the time to understand how it grows, why it grows so well in certain aspects. And you know, the slopes of Mount Etna are, you know, ever changing, but they have years and years and years of huge amounts of volcanic ash, but also very much a sort of acidic soil, which is phenomenal to make the grapes work, well, sorry, the vines work phenomenally hard to actually produce a fruit that is, you know, viable. But interesting enough, is caricante comes from the Italian word of caricare, which is actually a heavy load, and they're actually, it was known as a grape variety to produce a huge amount of grapes. So, which is brilliant as a winemaker if you can plant it on the side of a volcano where there isn't much going on, and it produces a huge amount of fruit. But the problem being is that you're going to get a very sort of thin, nondescript wine unless you start really making the vines work for you. And as Luke was saying, you're getting some older vines here which have to work harder, which get a bit more interesting in terms of complexity and of fruit. And yeah, so I think that's for me, caricante is a phenomenal grape to produce a wine style that is really, you know, yes, it's not probably very expressive in the glass compared to, definitely not to the Gewürztraminer, and maybe not to the first wine that we had from Spain, but as somebody has pointed out, you know, as a price point, it's pretty high up there. You know, we're at sort of £40 a bottle, and are we getting a great excitement for £40 a bottle? You know, sorry, £37.20. Thank you, Luke. And Jeremy, apologies. I thought I'd sent out the tasting sheet beforehand, and as I logged on, I suddenly had a sang-froid moment as I hadn't sent it out. But I'm glad somebody recognised, because, you know, no one normally does that.
Interesting. I think I'd be interesting to hear what anyone else says. I think it takes a little while to open up. It does feel fairly austere to start with. I've had a couple of bottles where it takes much longer to open up. This one was almost instantly. I don't know if it was my 25-minute walk home in 30 degrees that maybe brought the temperature up slightly before I got it back in the fridge or anything like that. But it's definitely more on the mineral side of the profile. So the fruit is quite straight down the line, citrus, fairly zesty. There's some apples there, I think red and green, even yellow and things. But it's 100% a whole bunch fermented. So they're not destemmed at all. The bunches are picked. They're taken care of before they get back to the winery, and then they're thrown into the fermenter still on the stems, and then crushed at that point, and then 100% barrel fermented as well. But they're massive barrels. They're 3,500 litre barrels. So I think actually after a couple of years, we're on 2017 here.
Wait for I got a picture of you with a barrel, Luke.
I do. Here we are. This is.
There it is.
Such a treat for everybody. So this is Jacopo, the winemaker. He's a reasonably young guy, but he grew up there. His entire life is Etna and winemaking and everything that's there. And of course, he gave me the lowdown. And I think these are 200-300 year old volcanic stone cellars that they've had on the property for a really, really long time. And there you go. You can see these are actually the slightly smaller barrels. I wouldn't want to guess how big they are, but I believe they have they'll have the Nerello Mascalese. So the grapes for them is Mecci wine and a couple of the other reds that they make. But still, they're quite big. They might be 2,000 liters or something. Either way, yeah, it's 100% barrel fermented. So you do get that slight oak influence, and I think that's part of what it takes to open up. It takes a few minutes to open up. There's some of that classic French. It's very subtle, but French spiciness that comes with the oak. Not really any vanilla there. It's not new. It's not. It doesn't have those kind of characteristics. But good. I'm pleased.
Yeah,
Catherine and Mark are well behind trips to Sicily as well.
When I chose this wine to go on, I know it's not a immediate crowd pleaser, because it is for the money that you spend. People are expecting a lot more, but when you look at the base wine itself, a third of the price, it is an absolutely, well, I won't go as far as I say undrinkable, but it really isn't a massively complex wine. Whereas Luke's very much right here, is that there is a huge mineral complexity here. Yes, there's not a huge amount of fruit and a lot of excitement on the palate, but you're getting this beautiful balance of fresh acidity and really quite, a really drying sort of style of minerality, which I don't think you would normally see.
I think, some of it you have to dig quite deep, and there's like a salinity there as well, which I think is part of the kind of the dryness, and that's a real kind of hallmark of extreme kind of volcanic terroir is that salinity. And if anyone's getting that before or now, kind of it gets pointed out, but it's all on the subtle side, and it's one of those things where when people say minerality, it's slightly controversial in terms of what people mean by that, but it's definitely there. It's not fruit, it's not spice, it's not floral. It's something else that's quite difficult to pin down. But that salinity, I think, is definitely there, and there's something else that's kind of steely about it, despite 100% barrel fermentation, not just barrel aged, barrel fermentation, and it has a very subtle complexity, I think, that's there.
So yeah, we've got some good chat. I think Jeremy, you've asked me to repeat the name of the grapes. Is that just because you thought it was my sort of pronunciation was quite comedy, or was that more? So you've got the first grapes of the evening were the Macabeo and the Grenache Blanco, and then you had the Gewürztraminer, and then the last wine of the evening is the Caricante. Which are those are the great varieties that we've sort of seen. And Catherine and Mark, you're absolutely right. I was, Luke was, I think, went to Sicily last year.
Last May it was. Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to go the year before, and it's an extraordinary wine producing region, and as much as the Italians slightly sort of in their own style, sort of put it down. It used to produce a huge amount of the sort of bulk wine to bolster the Italian the wine region in the north. So when Chianti was having a bad year, a little bit like Burgundy has its bad years, and would just happen to call up Morocco for a quick and Tunisia for a quick bulk up. That's what would happen, and Sicily was essentially producing these much heavier, richer styles of wine that was locally used, but then they would sort of ship them off to sort of bolster the wines of the north. So they do have a wonderful wine heritage. They have a wonderful heritage of their own in terms of food and as a region, and it's massively varied. Sicily looks quite tiny, but if anybody has attempted to drive from one side to the other, it's not a day trip. It's quite an adventure, and the wines of Etna stand very much alone and very proud for a region globally, let alone just within Italy. So and Jeremy, sort of food pairings with this. I think we're very much sort of in Chablis territory here in terms of that sort of minerality and that sort of acidity. So again,
agreed. I think you do really well to beat oysters with this. But if you're on the cooked end of the spectrum, maybe some kind of clam linguine, shellfish linguine of any kind would be a dish that you might find on Etna.
Truffled brie, it works.
Truffle brie. I'm pleased to see you're on the truffle cheese just purely by coincidence. I think it's some kind of cheddar. We've got a truffle cheddar that I wasn't expecting to see. I've been treated to that and it's been prepared for me this evening. But yeah, I think it's definitely the more subtle side of things. But like exactly like Charlie said, the more kind of steely, mineral, kind of shabbly profile. Even though I'd say that this is definitely up in the kind of Premier Cru, even pushing Grand Cru sort of shabby profile with the 100% barrel fermentation and the whole bunch as well. It can handle some pretty serious flavors. Even like a pizza with like a white base, like even like seafood pizza you see sometimes, those kinds of things. Maybe nothing hugely spicy or rich, but something like said always. I'm trying to see, was that in writing, Zoe? Did you just say that verbally? Because I'm not sure if that counts in a legal situation. But okay, I'm pleased we're agreeing on that. Definitely oysters. I'm pleased you agree with that because I think that's immediately what springs to mind. You know, I hadn't really thought about it until tonight. I've had it with a few dishes, but it's definitely food friendly and fairly versatile. I wouldn't necessarily pair it with the steak or any kind of slow cooked meat and anything like that, but seafood all the way. Even some kind of salad with a really herby full-on dressing, something like that.
Yeah, and I think that again, it's very difficult when when we put this tasting together was to sort of highlight grape varieties that stand on their own, when we're all very much sort of we have great varieties that we all personally champion, be it the Sauvignon Blancs or the Chenin's or the Chardonnays, and we have a particular style that we sort of follow. But just now still talking to you, having had a mouthful of truffle brie and the Caricante to finish, I can still actually taste that very much salinity, that freshness of the Caricante. And that in itself is a testament to what it's sort of created. But for us, it's the whole point of these tastings is kind of just to not only hopefully sort of expose you to slightly different styles of wine, but also make you understand what makes a really interesting wine and what doesn't. The fact of and I think there's a bit of a slightly English attitude to say, well, I don't like it at all, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what we're trying to point out here is that to get a good quality wine, you need to know slightly what the story is behind it that sort of makes it for us an exciting wine, because we know that they can produce some extraordinary wines, but we know that some of these great varieties are hardly known, and so we need to actually sort of go slightly behind what's going on and look at the story of the grape variety and the wine producer to create the wine that we're actually looking at today. So. Yeah. And it's not to say that this is the wine that you will grab off the shelf every day, but this is to say you guys are probably way over and above the more adventurous of the wine drinkers that you would see on average, and that the supermarkets try to target. So you've got to recognize that what we're trying to do is really sort of expand those palettes, because you guys are really looking to discover a little bit more. So that's why we're looking at these great varieties. And like I said, it may not be for everybody, but then the most important thing is do you like it or you don't like it? And then now you're able to assess, well, the reasons I don't like it is because it's not providing excitement for me on a palate front, but it's not providing excitement for me on a price point, and there's all sorts of things like that. So I think there's that's what we take into account when we do these tastings as well, is not just to try and show you wines that you grab and go, wow, this is exactly what I want, but it more, what is out there and what people are doing, or what new and exciting winemakers are doing with either old, virtually deceased grape varieties, in certain instances, or sort of taking grape varieties that shouldn't be in their home territory and sort of putting them into another location. So that's my speech for the honest.
Definitely, I think, yeah. I think
post that back to Nathan. I'll be more than delighted.
I was going to say, I think it's funny. I think we're on the third vintage of this one, Honest Grapes. I've definitely seen 3 come through. I've only been at the company for nearly 2 years, so I'm not certain we've had it for an entire 3 years. But we've been working with Vicina for a while, and up until just recently, we've only ever had this one, the Apadura, and then the Musmechi Red. Actually, a long time ago, we had Nero d'Avola as well. But you're absolutely right, Catherine and Mark. We don't sell tons of it. It doesn't move super quick, but it's one of those things where if you know the list at all, we definitely don't represent every region, every grape variety, even not even every country. A lot of the time, not even every major wine producing country. But I feel like an Etna White deserves a place on the list, just because it's something there that some people come to. You can point them in that direction, but I think it absolutely has that kind of. I'd like to think it might grow on people, but a lot of people don't like Chablis for the same reason. And Nathan's often heard saying famously that he's not a huge fan of Chablis. There's the odd one that grabs him occasionally. I'm not even sure how Tom got this one past him, actually, because I know it's one of his relationships historically. But it kind of has that same thing where it's all on the subtle end, and you either like it or you don't. But I'd be fascinated to see if people don't necessarily finish the bottle tonight, pop the cork in, throw it in the fridge, and try it again tomorrow. I think it will definitely develop. It'll be like one of those things where I think this one's got 10 years life in it in the bottle, and then it will eventually start to fade. It's not going to last forever, but it will go for about 10 years and develop really interestingly. So throwing it in the fridge tonight and trying another glass tomorrow is something similar to, say, giving it another 3 or 4 years. So give it a whirl there. Maybe you can see what Calicante, 5-6 year old Calicante is like.
I'm just actually tucking back into the Gewürztraminer, and I wholeheartedly put my hand up, and I normally never really grab a Gewürztraminer off the list because it's, I'm not the biggest fan. But actually that's for me, again, for doing stuff like this, I love it as a grape style when it's not as pronounced as it can be, because I've had obviously my fair share, and some of you may or may not have done, that it's a really fascinating grape that you're getting flavors that you're not getting from any other grape variety. So again, it may not be for everyone's taste, but if you know exactly what it tastes like and you know what you're cooking that evening, or you're trying to do something in particular, I think this is, to know what a good Gewürztraminer is brilliant.
They're quite polar opposites, actually, aren't they? The kind of subtle, slightly austere character of the Calicante, and then the much more out there, forward, the outspoken Gewürztraminer, even in a subtle version of that. They're an interesting contrast, definitely, to have next to each other.
Yeah.
I'm just looking to see if there's any residual sugar of note in here. I'm just
I didn't see that there was a huge
trying
amount.
To respond to Noel's comment there. It's definitely dry. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's about as low as it gets, around like 1.5% maybe.
Yeah, I think one of those, the sort of dryness scale is always a bit of a difficult one, because you can taste sweetness, but on a chemical level, when they analyze it, there's a certain amount of residual sugar, and that's what they analyze. So for them, it's dry, and Alsace and Germans, being dry in general as a population, they're very succinct when it comes to what the sort of sugar quantities are. So when they say it's dry, it's below the minimal amount of sugar that makes it feel like that. But that's Gewürztraminer as well. It's quite a rounded, full in the mouth grape variety anyway, before you actually even bring in any sugar. So yeah, warm Gewürz is a non-starter. Yeah, no, it's not. It's you're absolutely right, Jeremy, that it's not. It's definitely something that should be chilled. I mean, maybe a room temperature Riesling you might be able to get away with, but it's not a pleasant style. So no, Gewürztraminer, I think it's an important balance between that sort of zippy acidity and the light cheese. And I think if you let it warm up too much, it loses that zip of acidity, which is quite impressive.
Yeah, I think it's one of those Gewürz being on the aromatic side. It's not one that you would have wanted to open hours before or decant or anything like that. As soon as it's open, the aromas begin to kind of release themselves, and then along with just the freshness. I think this one is had a nice bit of age. It's not necessarily designed to be drunk instantly, but at the same time, it's still one of those things that's kind of nicer on the fresher side. And I think the grape variety in general is always that way inclined. Whereas I think it's so hot today that everything's warmed up super quick. So to try a pretty much room temperature Caricante that came out of the fridge half an hour ago, it's holding up slightly more, but even so, 30 degree, any white wine is going to be a tough drink at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry, Mark and Catherine, I couldn't bring you a map of Alsace that was suitable to our level of quality, because I think Alsace is a relatively, to really show well the differences in the aspect and stuff like that. I can show you a big map of most of France, and then it would be unexciting to really show the depths of Alsace in general. So sorry about that, but there we are.
I'm pretty sure we're on the lower slopes of the Vosges Mountains here, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. You're actually near Ribeauville, and I can spend a couple of minutes digging this out. But where the Kinsler, the domain itself. Let me just try. Oh, that's going to be the wrong region. So, but yes. We'll see if I can bring that up. But
generally, yeah, the steeper slopes are reserved on the whole for the Grand Cru Riesling. But considering this is from particularly well-renowned producer, I think they're not going to be on the steepest end of the mountains. But I've got a picture in my mind. Hopefully, Charlie can make that actually materialize in a visual map of exactly where they are. But
I'm going to see if I can make this work so that we are. There we are. Look, there we are.
Wow, fast as lightning there.
Yeah, there we are. So yeah, I'm just going to try and so Alsace. This is Alsace, obviously in general. You've got Strasbourg up in the north there side. So it really follows the Rhine as it goes down, and it's critical. You can see how it hugs the river all the way along the line, and it's obviously the numerous different appellations that you get are indicative of the fact that every single slight bend in the river and where there's been hundreds of years of different deposits, et cetera, of soil types, creates these different styles of wine, and they're all one over the other, trying to sort of create a different style of wine, and rightly so, because there is a variation that can happen. Absolutely. There we are. Best places to stay in Alsace. Jeremy, you always come up with the best questions. Jeremy and Anna.
I originally thought that travel agency comment was aimed at us, but it's actually aimed at Catherine and Mark. I'd love to hear where's recommended. I mean, I've not been myself. I'd love to go. It's one of those places where it's high up on a very long list. But I love the idea that the cross between predominantly Germanic history there, but now obviously a French kind of future and a more.
Well, it's moved. I think it was German, and then it became French, and then it became German again. And it became French. But actually, I always assumed this is a bit of a side movement, but I always assumed that Alsace, white wines, in terms of culinary destination, wasn't actually that great, but it's a phenomenal culinary destination. They have some amazing food there. I think Mark will probably be able to tell us how many gastronomic 2-star, 3-star restaurants there are there. But
there's a lot, isn't it?
It was a real eye-opener for me when they sort of started serving up heavy, wild boar and rabbit dishes with white wine, Gewürztraminer being one of them, some aged Rieslings, all of that sort of stuff. So they really are experts in their field, and their reds, which I've always sort of put Alsace and German Pinot Noirs, in terms of a very sort of, it's okay, but I wouldn't go to grab it. And actually, they really are really brilliant wines to go pair up with some of their local dishes and the cheeses that go with it. Places to stay. Off the top of my head,
really
I wouldn't be able to just pull out, and also my pronunciation of Alsace hoteleries are not brilliant, but I'd say either grab a car or grab a bike. I know Catherine and Mark are keen cyclists, and they will sort of, that is the beautiful way to see them. And not to forget that a lot of the Alsace and German regions are hugely steep in terms of their vineyards. So the fact that they're already trying to grow grapes in a cool climate and creating a fantastic wine, and then thirdly, they've got to do everything by hand, and if not only on top of that by sort of with winch, etc. Because there's no way they can actually get a tractor up there.
Just taking it back to a bit more of a kind of general basic point, like what Jeremy said there, it's an overlooked area. I think it suffers from a similar thing like a lot of German regions do. It's kind of the impronounceable, almost just impossible to deconstruct labels, and just no in all that kind of scary shaped bottle that everyone sees and thinks, I don't know if that's going to be dry, I don't know if that's going to be sweet. A lot of the words are very long and difficult to say. So it has that kind of, I don't know, lack of approachability isn't exactly the right thing to say, but it's suffered from that kind of reputational thing that a lot of German wines, it's coming around now with younger generations and just more knowledge in general. But for a long time, it's been like, if you know, you know. If you don't, then you can easily pick up a £50 bottle and think, you're getting a dry Riesling, for example, or even a dry version of Gewürztraminer, crack it open with a starter, and actually it's basically dessert wine level of sweetness. So there's all of that thrown in that I think is a slight barrier for a lot of people. But I think the reputation is definitely, it's always been high, but it's becoming more approachable. They're not changing the shapes of the bottles, as far as I know, and they're not changing the spellings of the words. Yeah. But hopefully just a little bit of extra knowledge, and even then, all the knowledge in the world wouldn't necessarily tell you exactly what's in the bottle. But for example, the alcohol level, the ABV, if it's 13.5 like this one is, there's no way it's going to be particularly sweet because they won't be adding any sugar. So the vast majority of the sugar has been fermented out. So lower alcohol, generally sweeter wine, all of that kind of thing. It's just point us in the right direction. Will hopefully not help you help you not make a huge mistake, should I say, as opposed to you'd be 100% confident about what's in the bottle. But there's a few more English words coming in, whether that's for better or for worse. I think there's some kind of dry, off dry, medium sweet, and I think that's more at supermarket level. They'll be added specifically, but it's certainly been a barrier in the past.
Well, there we are, folks. Hopefully we've opened your eyes to a couple of new opportunities, or at least sort of made you double take before you choose off the wine list, or make your choice off the shelf. But we as always, for those people that need to clock off, I've just realised it's very dark in here. I look like in the bottom of a cave. The sun was shining so brightly in here that I just had to.
I'm intrigued. What room of the house is that? A stack of pillows behind you, Charlie?
Yeah.
Is it? Right.
It is a stack of pillows, yeah. No, it's just the children. Yeah, no, it is a stack of pillows, yeah. It was the quietest room in the house that I could find. I've decamped to my parents' house now that the borders are vaguely open, and yes, it's no longer my own domain, and so I have to find the quietest place in the house. But so no, hopefully we've been able to sort of show you a little bit outside of the norms, and I'm always happy to sort of show, and discuss afterwards. But I know there's some people that need to leave, some people that need to go off. So for those, I hope you've had a good evening, and for those who want to stay and chat, please do. Jeremy, I'm glad that the Lumi Blanc was your favourite, and it's a great wine. We're really excited by it in the sense that it's, most people would sort of shy away from a £12.50 bottle of Spanish white, but it's actually got a lot going for it.
I think, yeah, it got a really great write-up in Decanter. I think it was the second half of last year, and I think it was Jane Anson. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's ideal for something for us to throw on the website as the additional note that Tom had on there already. But it offers loads, and again, it's on the subtle end, but it offers loads, I think, at that price point. And it's been a perennial favourite as far as I know, certainly as long as I've been at Honest Grapes. It's one of those things where it's just a really great quality product at that kind of price point. It's not always easy to find, and definitely one of those where I think it benefits from being slightly off the radar in the sense that if loads more people were trying to buy it, the value would be higher and the price would be higher. So it's one of those things.
Absolutely. So just as I close off, you'll be glad to know with all our slight polling, we're going to keep another 2 sessions going into for the wine therapy as we go into into January. So I think Tom and I are hopefully finalising those in the coming days. There will be we haven't quite decided what the next, the one after Loire is, but he was talking South America, sorry, but we haven't quite finalised that. And then Jeremy will be delighted to know we're going to finish on the UK for Great Britain wine. So yeah, no, we're going to change your mind.
Just so that's clear, there's the schedule
you've ever tasted, Jeremy, from grapes. We're going to change your mind. Panic not. And then we've got some other fun tastings coming up. Last night we had a fantastic tasting with the champagne Frère Frère, and then Exton Park from the English Sparkling, which is brilliant. We've also got a really interesting tasting from Argentina of a Malbec wine. Malbec-based wine, should I say? But really, really interesting. So we're going to be putting that together. So and there will be other tastings as we keep going through. We haven't actually, as Boris hasn't figured out, we haven't figured out what the hell's going on with what's going on. So we're just going to keep producing our tastings, and we'd love to obviously all see you. Can I say physically, but face to face, shall we say, in the future? But at the moment, we're sort of hogtied in terms of how we can bring these tastings to you. But we're always open to ideas, and if there's particular tastings that you'd like to see in the future, we'd be delighted to try and put them together as well. So thank you all for sort of joining us once again. Some new faces, which is always lovely, some regular faces, and I'm sad to say Tom was going to be hosting next week, but it's now me again. I know it's disappointing. I know, yeah, thank you, Jeremy, for your vote of support. Lovely. But yes, we'll be here again. And I look forward to seeing you, some of you next Thursday. And those of you who joined us first time this time, I hope you had a really wonderful day. Evening, sorry. Take care, guys.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, everyone?
Yeah,
else?
Thank you very much.
Feel free to stay on. Yeah, unmute, stay on. After hours lock-in style. I know it's funny. There's quite a big football match starting at 8 o'clock tonight, but I don't think anyone really cares about catching the build-up anymore. I'm not sure it's a thing. Is it? I mean, apart from kind of artificially piped in.
You're preaching to the wrong choir there, my friend.
Yeah, I might be, but I think in more normal times that might be a factor. As of now,
the artificial sound in a football match is just a bit weird.
It is odd, isn't it? I'm
really,
struggling
really
to decide.
odd. I watched the game I watched the game earlier this week, and it was just weird. And I think I would have preferred no sound whatsoever, except the artificial fan sound was just not. It just.
I want to hear the players swearing at each other and at the ref. I mean, that's something at least. If they pipe too much in, you can't hear that. And that's I think we should.
You had quite a few swear words in the Aston Villa match. I have to say that.
Wow, I didn't. Yeah, the fact that they got to put noise in to make it feel like there's a build-up and there's an excitement. I don't.
Well, when you're watching the game, they use artificial sound for crowd noise for the people on the TV watching it, so it doesn't just have a silent buzz for 90 minutes.
Yeah, it does have a very training session feel without any sound.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, you can hear every kick. And,
I'd much rather be here drinking wine.
I think I prefer watching football that way, but then again, I'm a rugby man, so I can't.
I'm very much a rugby man as well, so I do like a bit of both, but yeah. Zoe had a work quiz today, and she got the whole semi-final of World Cup rugby wrong, and I'm like, why didn't you just come and ask me? New Zealand did not win the Rugby World Cup.
It's a different one. It's
mistake
to win it. So, ladies and gents, I am being called to dinner, so I'm gonna let you all go. But I hope you've had a wonderful evening, and look forward to seeing some of you next week. Take care, guys.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a lovely rest of the evening. And I mean, I'm not going anywhere. I am going to turn the TV on in 10 minutes precisely to catch 30 seconds build up of the football. Apart from that, I've got a small plate of cheese and a sausage sign. I think that I barely touched, so I don't need to move for the next 10 minutes.
There we go. Have a good evening, guys. Take care.
Cheers, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye. Have a good night.